Hi everyone, it's Catherine, and we are back with our Clash of Kings reread. And I was just saying to Claire, we're coming up to the quarter mark. I think we're about a quarter of the way through, and yeah, we are reading all the way from Theon 1 to Bran 2, so that's chapter 11 to chapter 16. And next week we will read from Tyrion 4 all the way to Cat 2. Which is chapter 17 to 22. So, as always, we have the Oracle here, Claire. So, Claire, we were kind of maybe saying that this week's selection wasn't as exciting as last week's. Well, it didn't feel that exciting for me anyway.
Yeah, I think the pace is a little bit different, but I think there is a lot of intertwining, actually, especially between the three middle chapters.
Yeah. The Arya chapter definitely came at the right point for me, to be honest.
Yes, yeah. And, you know, there's the world building aspect at this stage, isn't there? So, you know, Theon gets his first point of view chapter, so we delve into his mind a little bit more for the very first time. And then we also have the kind of political intrigue happening with Tyrion in King's Landing, so we begin to see who's who in this Game of Thrones. So I did it felt like it took me longer to read the chapters this week than it usually does. It was there were a couple of times particularly in the Bran and in the Arya chapter where I actually had to stop. I could tell it wasn't going in, so I had to just stop and then pick it up at another time, and that's not happened before. So yeah.
I found Theon's chapter particularly repellent and hard to get into because I forgot how awful he is in this chapter. As a human being. So I had to start and go back to that a couple of times during at the beginning of the week. So just it's uncomfortable because he has so much inner monologue as well. So by the way, one of my feelings is like on the verge of falling out. So if I'm talking funny, I'm sorry. I'm getting fixed tomorrow. It's driving me mad. Anyway, so Theon 1, our first POV from Theon. And in general, I like Theon's chapters the further we go into the series. I think he gets much more, I think he becomes a more interesting character. But at this point, like just the way he's thinking, do you think he's kind of irredeemable? Do you think there's any hope for him as a character?
I'm not as harsh with Theon as I think most people are, and we'll get into that when we get into the chapter. But I think I don't think Theon's deep down as bad as people think he is. And I think he does. I think he does get a hard time, but he's one of the most complex characters for me. And I like to try and think about Theon from lots of different angles, and this just the very unique situation that he's been in, which is almost like this split between the core of who he is. And in this chapter, the very first thing that his father says to him is, "And what are you now?" And that question follows Theon and defines his character as we progress with him. And I think this as brutal and as harsh as it is, delving into this environment of the Iron Islands and just how horrible Theon is in, you know, he's full of bravado and petulance. He's just a little shit, really, in this chapter. But I think there's context there for me as well in terms of where he's come from and the situation that he's been in and the influences that he's had. And, you know,
So my biggest problem with this is that Rob sent him on his own. So Theon is on his own going to the Iron Islands. And I feel like if Rob had sent somebody else that he trusted with Theon, even if Balon had killed that person, that in itself would have been a lesson to Theon that he's like, this isn't the place for him. But I feel like nobody comes to meet him, and he has to make his own way to Pike, and that's why he's on that boat with, or that ship with the captain and the daughter, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like he's trying to prove himself as an Iron Islander before he gets back, and that isn't to excuse what he does with the captain's daughter, but it is pretty, like, it is pretty awful. And there's lots of theories that he impregnates her and stuff on this journey. But when he arrives then finally in Pike, he meets his uncle Aaron Dampere, who I think some of what happens there with him might tie in maybe with your theory about gods. Just the way he almost drowns and he comes back up and he has this like religious experience, and Theon knows that because he'd heard that from Balon. And so was he in contact with Balon while he was in Winterfell? I didn't really I didn't get that. I need to go back and read that again because I wasn't really sure what he meant.
The fact that he can remember the words?
No, the fact that he knew that Dampere had drowned. And did that happen before Theon went to Winterfell?
Maybe.
It seemed like it happened while he was at Winterfell, which means that he found out from Balon. I didn't he said Balon told him that, I think. But anyway,
maybe it happened around the same time, or
maybe,
it's because he's 19 now, Theon.
Yeah.
He's been at Winterfell. He's been fostered at Winterfell since he was 9 years old. So he's returning to Pike after 10 years. That's almost the exact split in his life, actually. So it's interesting that it's happening to him now at this age. But the thing that I've got about Theon is what's happened in terms of his experience as well has been quite rapid.
Yeah.
Not too long ago, he was reasonably comfortable, but with a bit of a chip on his shoulder at Winterfell. And he was pretty much best buddies with Robb. In fact, Robb seemed to get on with and spend more time with Theon than he did Jon. They were good buddies. And he had time very quickly to sort of prove himself as, again, this best buddy in the battles. And as Kat observed, Theon was always there. He's always around. He's in the inner circle. So he's obviously got Robb's, so what we've got here is two teenage boys. Again, I think Robb and Ned wouldn't necessarily put them together in terms of their background and their families, but they became, best buddies. Similar sort of thing, I think, has happened here. And Theon has got this sense of his best friend who he was going, hunting and sword practice in Winterfell, is now king. He's king of the North. His best friend. I mean, and they're both teenagers. And I just think he's looking at Robb and thinking, yes, he's in the inner circle and he's part of this kind of. He wants his own crown and glory. Theon's thinking, well, look what's happened to Robb. I can get that. And actually, that's not outside of the realms of possibility. Look who my father is. He's gone for a crown before. So that's the mindset that Theon is in. And this full of all this like power crazy sense of entitlement would have happened very quickly. And he's also looking at his friend Robb, who's suddenly become king of the North, and everyone's like thinking he's amazing, this boy king. So Theon wants a piece of that. Why shouldn't he? Robb's got it. Why shouldn't he have that? And he
thinks the comet is even for him, doesn't
he? Yeah, exactly. It's my comet. So he's a petulant, and I sound like I'm forgiving him here, but just think of that as part of the context of where he's at. Yes, he's been an absolute turd. He's just been a petulant self-entitled teenager. I find there's part of this, if you look at it in that way, really, this chapter is absolutely hilarious. The unbelievable amount of overestimation that Theon has in his own sense of importance, and very quickly how he underestimates the Ironborn and how that gets massively slapped in his face, is just, it's like his dad turns around and goes, whoa, absolute, whatever you think is in your head that you're coming here to bring me. And he just completely like tears him apart. But that question again, you know, we shall see. What are you now? We shall see. It was just yeah, this is the beginning of the deconstruction of Theon already from by his own father's hand. But this is, and it didn't last long. You know, this very quick rise of Robb. Theon hanging on the coattails, thinking, "I want my crown. I want my glory," and then the very quick reality of this is going to be very different to how I think I wanted it to be. He wanted it to be, Robb's going to have that, my best friend's going to have that area. It's kind of like it's like playground, you know.
Yeah.
You have that portion, I'll have this put, you can have the north, I'll have, and that's probably why he did go back to the Iron Islands without a guard or anything like that. They probably had this ridiculous, even like mini pact between them, as the like teenage boy best friends do. It's fantasy in Theon's head, and he gets a massive dose of reality in this chapter, which just again enriches his character for me. He's a very, very complex. He's one of my favorite characters, actually. Theon.
He is, and he's a very honest character.
Yeah.
There's no hiding. Like he's like Tyrion, like that.
Yeah.
He never hides his motives, and he's completely honest. That's for sure. I think I have a couple of questions. So what is the long-term plan for Theon had none of this happened? Had everybody stayed in Winterfell, the Starks are fine. What was the long-term, like, what's the idea for Theon going forward with Ned? Like, he can't marry if he's still at Winterfell, right? Which he obviously figured out at a young age, which is why he decided, right, well, I might as well just start riding all around me, which he's probably responsible for introducing Jon and Robb to the idea of sex and prostitutes and things like that, because he probably realized very early on, I'm not going to be allowed to marry anyway, so I might as well just...
That's actually, that's an interesting question, because there's two types of scenarios where a young person would go and live with another family in Westeros. One is to be fostered, as in Ned and Robb at the Eyrie, which is a voluntary thing. There are no conditions. It's just, I suppose, it's kind of like a foreign exchange program. You know, you're supposed to, you get to find out. Yeah, you get to find out what it's like in another part of the world that you come from. Then you've got the situation like Theon and other, it's not unique. You know, there have been other situations in history and in the present in this story where there have been, it's you will be a ward pending your father's, you know, your house or your father's good behavior.
Right.
And I don't know. I don't know. I mean, in the first scenario, like Ned, you obviously come of age and then return to your house to become, whether it's Lord of, you know, Winterfell, or in terms of the Starks, if you know, join the Night's Watch, or you get married to a house that's like a lesser lord in the north. But I don't know what would happen to, you know, do they remain attached to that house past coming of age?
Hey, John, maybe you know what would have happened to Theon had nothing Had none of this happened and all the Starks were still at Winterfell.
Would they have just sent him back as an adult, like age 25, or would
because
he have been
19 is around about hi Sonny as well. 19 is around the age you should be getting married.
Yes.
You should start to make your mark on the world.
And marriage alliances comes up quite a bit in the next, in Bran's chapter.
The only saving grace I can think of is if Euron would still have gone forward with his plan to take Balon out, then that may have been where they could have played Theon as a pawn in this game. If Balon died, AU. Just if nothing had happened, like Ned hadn't died, everybody was still at Winterfell. Like, what's the long-term plan for Theon in that situation? A hostage in that situation. So,
would he have continued to stay in Winterfell, and maybe would Ned have arranged for him to marry one of the northern houses to strengthen that alliance, or would there have been an expectation for him to go back to Pike?
Let's face it,
he's the heir.
Theon,
legitimately.
and Theon, he doesn't like it there, really. Like, he has these moments of nostalgia, but like they don't bring him hot water to wash with, and it's seawater when it does arrive, and there's all these things that he doesn't have, the creature comforts that he's become accustomed to, because nobody has those things in Pike. Like, if you want something, you have to take it by the iron way, isn't it? Like, there's nothing nice about living on Pike. But apart from that, do you think things would have been different if his mother was there? Because women in Pike are a little bit different to women everywhere else, and his mother is quite a vocal character when we meet her later in Feast.
Yeah.
And I know she's very sickly, but so AU says Theon would stay in Winterfell until Balon died or Ned released him. Yeah, it's just, this is why I think he's so sexually active, and he's not, like, he doesn't seem to be, it's not that he doesn't enjoy having sex, but it's like, it's very it's almost a methodical thing. It's almost like it's a means to an end. Like, he seems to have an ulterior motive when he's having sex. There's something else going on. It's like he's trying to prove himself, or I don't know. It's not.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know. There's something, like, he clearly wants to say, oh, this would be a salt wife for me, and now I can go and tell Daddy that I have a salt wife, kind of thing. Or there's something really weird, like, where he's constantly, and we'll get that throughout the series, where he's constantly trying to, Daddy, look at me, whether it's Balon or Ned.
But can you imagine, though, if you knew that if you were fostered somewhere, or you were sent to, a boarding school or something, where it was a completely different environment where you came from, and where you came from was a culture that was harsh and fierce and known for their brutality, and then you get fostered in this much nicer environment, you would grow up. I mean, what would that do to you? You would feel as though you belong to, it's like you knowing where his roots are, but having this really weird, childish imagination and development of how he thinks should be. It's almost like a cartoon version of what reality is, and he doesn't seem to have any kind of sense of grasp of he's even taken affront at the fact that there isn't a party to receive him there. He expects his father, and again, in this fantasy Disney world that he's created, that he thinks is his, he's what he's going to be reaching for, his crown and glory, his story. He thinks he's developing himself. He wants to take Casterly Rock. He wants his crown. He wants that, his ridiculous story that he's invented in his head, and the fact that he's affronted that his father's not there is just like, oh Theon, you're going to get such taken down several pegs very quickly.
Yeah, OU and Sonny are saying that it is like
mm,
a domination and power play thing, and there's definitely that need
yeah,
to control the situation. And P Sand, hi P Sand, nice to see you again, is saying that there's a need for an approval from father figures. And I
mm,
think that is so true. And I'll go back to what I said at the beginning of this. I think if you're going to align someone, another POV with Theon, it'll have to be Tyrion.
mm,
They have the same, they're the same honesty in their inner monologues, and that need to of attention from father figures, but
yeah.
also trying to control things through sex. Like that's the way Tyrion deals with things as well. Definitely.
Even I'm just thinking of the parallels between Theon and Tyrion. Actually, even the fact that Theon has said he wants Castle Rock, and we know that Tyrion feels that he is well, technically, but also he feels that he's entitled to Castle Rock as well.
But this idea that he thinks he can present that as a viable option to his father, when I'm sure Balon has just been for the last 10 years just trying to think of a way of getting back at Ned Stark. Like, you know, both of his sons, his older sons, are dead as a result of that. Like, why wouldn't he think about getting back Ned Stark every single day for the last 10 years? Like anyone would. Pisan says Theon has been away for 10 years. I'd expect some sort of welcome as well. I'd have to agree with you there. I think someone should have been there. They did that differently in the show. The Ironborn just don't care. Theon may as well be dead, especially when later we find out that Aeron talked shit about him to Balon. Yeah, I agree. And I think that the first thing, your first experience is your uncle baptizing you. Is yeah, it's a bit yeah, it's a bit of
But
a,
I
it
think
is a bit of a strange welcome.
I think that they see the opportunity to be able to use him to their advantage. So I think that, and that's exactly what they do. You know, Balon wants to take the north, and that's
Yeah.
exactly how things.
And I do blame Rob for not sending someone else with him. I think that's a huge misstep there on Rob's part. Um, just a couple of
Oh,
things.
hi,
Hey
Jules.
Jules, hi Jules, enjoy your cooking. I just wanted to ask, what is Balon's plan when he takes Winterfell? Like, what do the Ironborn do with the North? Just like, you just have it then. There's like, you're just gonna rape and pillage because they don't sow. We do not sow. So
Yeah. I think in history, the Ironborn have had more of a territorial advantage than they do at the moment, and they kind of went into the north, didn't they? They've always been trying to attack Bear Island. So it's always been, you know, Balon, the way that he's like, it's there for the taking right now. His nemesis, Ned Stark, isn't there anymore. And not only that, his son is distracted somewhere. Oh my God, this couldn't be a better time than to just go in there and grab it.
Yeah.
He probably hasn't really thought that much beyond that, apart from just revenge and.
But Kat must have seen,
You know,
like, why doesn't she spell that out clearly to Rob? Because it's so obvious. It feels like it's really obvious.
yeah.
Pisan says Theon is viewed as a person from the Greenlands now that pushes him to prove himself. He just goes way too far with it. And Balon is a fool. Asha can see that as that's why she's somewhat progressive. Yeah. And I think a lot of the women are way more insightful and they have better instincts on the Iron Islands than some, and on Bear Island as well, because they just live harder lives. So yeah, we get, and even in the next chapter, we actually get a lot about Bear Island in the next chapter as well with Yora, and it just makes me wonder, like, why would you stay on the Iron Islands if you could get away at all? I'd be out of there. And Iron Islands, even though it is like geographically is supposed to be Ireland. We're nothing like that.
Well, there's a lot of emphasis.
We don't take back to the seawater.
There is a lot of emphasis, though, isn't there, on the old ways, and this is kind of ingrained in them as part of their culture. And there is that sort of, I kind of can understand that way of life. I mean, I've sort of seen, and you know, I've seen that in different ways. I'm just thinking of even like family members that I've got an auntie who were talking about this actually at the weekend at the wedding, that I was telling you that I went to on Friday. An auntie that we've got who's had the same, it's called a spinner, so it's not as good as a washing machine or a spindle. It's basically like an old spinner. And she's had this thing for older, that like basically she's had it for more than like 40 years, and everyone's like, why don't you just get a washing machine, they're not that expensive. And it's like she's so stuck in the old ways of doing, like, this is how she does her laundry, that it's like, oh my god. But it's like she's super protective of it, and it's like, and she gets really kind of like narky with you when you try to suggest, well, your life would be so much easier if you just had, you know. And I suppose Theon's having the same sort of, you know, life would be so much, you know, yes, I bought this wonderful outfit with, you know, it was gifted to me by my wonderful friend Rob, and, you know, things can be, he is being a ridiculous, super entitled, power drunk teenager that's got a very skewed sense of reality. And what's made it even worse is he's seen his best friend rise to fame very swiftly, and he thinks he can be part of that, and I don't really think there's any plans beyond that.
You know, and P. Santa said the only male I respect from the Iron Islands is Roderick Harlaw, and Theon's mother is a Harlaw. So the Harlaws are actually, you know, there's somebody to watch on the Iron Islands in terms of that progressive streak, maybe shining through. But it is worth mentioning that if you're on an island like Pike, you're probably better off there during winter than you are on the mainland in a lot of ways. Depending on, you know, how things go. Like I mean, if you're already able to survive there without sewing, you might be all right there in winter. But Ion Throne said Roderick the Reader will be the last survivor writing the history of A Song of Ice and Fire in his life.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that, definitely. And there's actually, now Iron Throne's here, I can go a bit tinfoil, because there's certain aspects to this chapter that I found quite interesting. But yes, P-Sand, you're absolutely right. My auntie isn't hurting anyone else with her old ways. But you know, it's just that observation of how people can be so obsessively protective over the way that, you know, it's always been done this way, and it's a very, very strange, brutal, harsh culture, the Ironborn. I kind of wish we knew a little bit more about the on Skagos, aren't they called the Stoneborn over there? And again, that's probably a completely different culture that's very different from the rest of Westeros. But the question that I had is, do you think that this is kind of like a geology question, I suppose, but do you think the Iron Islands could possibly be older than the rest of Westeros? I'm just thinking, because there's a few things here. There's the description in this chapter of the rocks being worn away by the sea, as if that it's happened over a much longer period of time than maybe some of the kind of geological features that we get on the mainland. The question's really about, we don't really know too much or too specifically what the origins of the Ironborn are. And if you think about their ways, the old ways, and some of their traditions, it's some of it is it's so different from Westeros that it just makes you think, it just seems like they've been there. The whole culture has been there a lot longer than what's happening on the mainland. And then there's this thing about the sea stone chair, and that nobody really knows where it came from. And again, just dipping into World of Ice and Fire, there was an excerpt that I came across that it was one of those sections where the Meister who's writing writing the extracts in A World of Ice and Fire says something about, yeah, there's a rumor that there was some kind of third race at some point in Westeros, but nobody really just, and he just kind of brushes over it, and it's like, what? What's this? Some third race? And and I think they were talking about, I don't know, like the original inhabitants of Westeros were the children of the forest and the giants, but was there a third race that was maybe part of that area, that the kind of Iron Islands area, and maybe they brought the sea stone chair, and maybe that some of the origins. I mean, clearly one of the huge differences is this culture has a completely different religion, and it's the drown god. So completely different faith, different way of life. This focus on salt and stone and steel, again, the kind of geological thing. But one of the things about their culture is this phrase, that, again, that's tied to the religion: what is dead may never die, but rises again harder and stronger. And that can be applied to so many other areas of this story. As soon as, when I read this again the first time, I mean, it's a really, it's a well-known phrase that's attached to this culture, and we hear it. I think for probably the first time in this chapter. But I immediately thought about others and whites. That you could almost, if you looked at that clip of the TV show, going back to the TV show, but where the Night's King is kind of rising, on the kind of icy banks of Hardhome. If he just said those words, "What is dead may never die, but rises again," it wouldn't seem out of place for him to say those words as he's raising the dead in that particular scene. And again, with Daenerys and the dragons, what is dead may never die, but rises harder and stronger. There's so many different areas of this whole world and story that this particular phrase could be applied to. Well, but we find it here.
Well, if the Iron Islands, they're in the same kind of area as Ireland would be if it was like to the west of Britain. And P. Sands just mentioned it there, that there is a theory that the Iron Islands were colonized from the west rather than east.
Right.
Now, if you look at Irish history, there's actually civilizations in Irish history, and we have things like Newgrange, which are a lot older than the pyramids, a lot older than monuments that you'll find in Britain, for instance. I don't know if it's older than Stonehenge. I have a feeling it might be, but I could be wrong on that. But this idea that there's like ancient tribes, I'm not saying that Ireland was populated from like North America or anything like that, but they do say that the first Westerner, like the first European to reach America, was Irish, was like an old Irish saint, I think Saint Brendan or something. But this idea that, like, I think George plays with that a lot. We have this very set idea about what history is, and that's very linear. But I think he plays with that a lot in this series, that things are actually way more advanced in the past than you think they are. In a lot of ways, they're in the dark ages right now in Westeros. And I try to tell my kids this all the time when we're looking at ideas in literature and things like that. The history is littered with regressive ideas as much as progressive ideas. Like, don't think of everything as being linear. We often go backwards.
Yes.
We often like if you look at something, and George is obviously playing with this idea as well. Like if you look at something like Dragonstone or the Eyrie, like how the hell did they create that? Like why? Like how are they not still making these kinds of places? Why are they not still building these kinds of places? How are they just there and nobody knows who put them there? You know, that kind of way. Like and I think the Iron Islands could be that as well. That there's and tribal culture there, that, and it's so miserable there that there must be something else at the back of it. There's an inherited instinctive kind of history and a solid history that's like encouraging this kind of lifestyle and culture. What about, oh, Sonny Frank said there's been a lot of resurrections. Cat, Patchface, Beric, and John will be next. Well, we hope so. And Damp Hair seems to be one as well.
Yeah. I just think it's interesting what you're saying about history being regressive and progressive, because that again is a big feature in throughout the story of different characters thinking about, do we, with what we're faced with here, do we carve out a new way of doing things, or do we want to revert back to the old ways? And
it is funny when we get to the Tyrion chapter where he is, oh, thanks AU, I just reached 700 subs.
Hey.
I didn't see it, thank you. Tyrion, yeah, we get that with Tyrion as well, where he has to kind of get people in King's Landing to go out and make fishing boats. Yeah. It's the most basic thing in the world. Why don't you're all starving? Well, why don't we just make some boats?
Yeah.
And like, how has nobody thought of that already?
Yeah.
Go out, do some fishing, and then we can feed ourselves. It's just so, like, the Ironborn would have already done that. Even though they're backward in other ways culturally, they would have already been feeding people. Do you know, like it's
I think there's a clear lack of leadership really across the board, apart from Tywin and what you know, where Tywin's at and what he's doing. Things seem very fragmented when it comes to a sort of mandate for clear leadership anywhere, really.
Yeah, definitely.
And you've got puppets like Joffrey and, to an extent, Robb.
So, so we leave the end of this where Balon is clearly encouraging Theon to go take Winterfell. If you were Theon, if I was Theon, would you do it? Like, what is, like, has he learned nothing from the Starks? Like, how can they hope to hold Winterfell? I don't, like, nobody respects him. Like, I just feel like he, like you're saying, he's so wrapped up in this idea of power and of being the Prince of the Iron Islands that I don't know what he's thinking at this stage. And it's not like he's overjoyed with the thoughts at the end of this chapter. Like, the reader can tell where he's going.
There's so many things that you could look at this from the perspective of, he's now thinking, right, okay, shit, I need to ingratiate myself very quickly with my father and let him, I need to prove to him. I thought I'd just be able to walk in and snatch some power here, but clearly I'm going to need to prove something to him. So I will basically, I'm going to do what my dad says, but I still have my own plans for how I want things to go. And he kind of thinks that when he gets north, he thinks, oh well, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that because that's what he wants me to do. But really, this is what I'm going to do, or this is what my plans are. And he starts to kind of, you know, go off on a tangent, and then he gets very caught up, and obviously then things start sliding downhill really quickly for Theon.
Was there any hope of Robb saving the situation had he not used the word give? Like, give me a crown. Like, when that's what seems to like completely set Balon off. I kind of feel like he was gonna come up with this plan anyway, but I think had it been put to him differently, and again, had somebody else been sent with Theon. I mean, there's lots of ifs, ands, and buts, but P. San said the nobility of the Ironborn are holding back the common people. Yeah, that's true. And also, if I was going to portray Robb, I would take Winterfell, take hostages, and then leave. Yeah. especially with winter coming.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
So that's Theon. Will we move on to Dany?
Yeah, there was just one last thing, which is Asha featuring in this chapter, and it just made me think. Actually, this is an example of lots of other female characters in this story playing other characters. So you've got Asha playing Hillier, is it Hillier? Then obviously we've had Arya in disguise already, and she's in disguise several times as her story progresses. You've got one of the Sand Snakes later on in the story, and you've got Sansa under a pseudonym later on in the story. So this is not, considering that this happens, I can count on my hand like 5 times already different female characters that play other women or that are in disguise. So it wouldn't surprise me if this isn't the only time that this will happen before the end of the books. So you've got to think of, in the frame for that, are people like Septa Lamore, whose name I suddenly could remember this week, and also there's something about the Silent Sisters as well. There's something about the Silent Sisters that just makes me think, wow, that sounds like an easy place to hide somebody who is in disguise and playing somebody else. And because we know that it's not unheard of in this series of books, then I don't think we'll be surprised, and I think we can possibly even expect it.
And it's a good kind of segue into Dany's chapter, where we meet one of the most contentious, most theory-driven characters in Dany's arc. Maybe one of the top 10 in the whole series, which is Quaithe. Quaithe. I don't know what people say. I say Quaithe.
Quaithe, yeah. Quaithe,
yeah. So that's kind of a nice segue into that chapter, because we do end with it. And I'd forgotten that she appeared so quickly in Clash, actually. But what I like about Dany 1, so they're going through the Red Waste, and there's a lot of biblical allusion in this. Dany, kind of like this Moses / Messiah figure who's leading her people through the desert, and then at the end kind of meets her version of the 3 wise men.
It's very much kind of herald, heralding her this kind of second coming of the Targaryens.
But in fairness to George, I don't think the comet is mentioned again then. Well, it is mentioned again, but like so far it's been mentioned in every single chapter up to Dany. And then finally, when Dany says, "This is my comet," I think the reader goes, "Yeah, it is." And I don't think it gets mentioned in Jon Arryn. I don't think it gets mentioned.
No, I don't think it does now.
So I think it's George's way of saying, "No, did you remember, Dany? We're nearly a quarter way through. You know, that big reveal at the end of Game of Thrones. This is her comet." I feel. Now I know he may not agree with that, but I feel it is kind of saying that it is her comet, and she decides she's going to follow it. And I think for me the biggest thing about this chapter, apart from one of her blood riders finding the dragon skeleton, is Jorah's story, and and also Jorah's story and what she thinks, why she thinks the dragons are now in the world, what brought about the dragons. She says that it was her faith and her need, and Drogo's blood, and her son's blood, and Miri Maz Jorah's blood. But she really puts her faith and need, which for me kind of says that she knew, or she at least believed, that the dragons would hatch. This was going to bring about the dragons. And it's almost like she's saying she willed it to happen. So I don't know what you think of that. But also, Jorah's story is also, it reveals a lot about Jorah in this chapter. So
I've got a couple of questions actually with that. I absolutely agree that the comet stops with Dany and it heralds her coming. I thought it it made me smile when there's a quote from this chapter where she's referring to her dragons and she says, "No man will take them from me," which makes me think, I wonder if a female character will take one of the dragons from her. You can really tell in this chapter, this whole, again, building the atmosphere of crossing the Red Waste. Dany's starting to feel older. She feels the weight of responsibility and leadership, and the whole landscape, really, this dry, barren red waste. It alludes to. It's almost like a physical manifestation of the hunger and the thirst that they've got. You know, they've run out of food. They've got no water. There's suffering, and it's almost like, yeah, you know, in order to get what you want at the end of this, you have to go through this suffering. And this happens, of course, to other characters as well. You've got Bran going through the suffering of his the fall and his injury. One of the things that I got from this chapter just links immediately to the next two chapters is in Dany's chapter, you get a deserted city referred to as White City, Ghost City, City of Bones. In Jon's chapter, you get a deserted village, White Tree, that's got huge skulls, but a huge mouth of the weirwood and skulls and bones. And again, in Arya's chapter, so 3 chapters on the run, you get what's featured is a deserted town or city or village, where they're at the keep, the Holdfast keep, and it's completely deserted. So those 3 chapters kind of tie in together just for that. But I think that it did. I kind of raised an eyebrow at one of the riders seeing the bones of a dragon, and also one of the other riders mentioned that there were 2 more smaller deserted cities, and then it's like, oh, the next 2 chapters you get 2 smaller deserted. You know, it's that made me smile. But again, this could be, you know, ancient bones of a dragon, which wouldn't necessarily be too much of a surprise.
I think a lot of people like the nettles theory, is it?
Yeah, that could have been nettles. Yeah. There was another dragon as well, wasn't there? That was kind of wild.
Nettles is quaked. No.
Yeah, the main thing, really, I think, same with you. For me, the part of this chapter that talks where Jorah reveals his past a little bit more, and he talks about his first wife. So he talks about Lyness Hightower, and we get a little bit more history into that and how he's arrived at where he is, and the fact that his first wife creepily looks like Dany. So Dany, obviously, by the end of this chapter, realizes that Jorah loves her, but she can't. She tries to even imagine it, and just can't.
Stranger danger.
Yeah, stranger danger. Just can't imagine it. But she seems to feel for him enough and feel sorry for him maybe enough to vow to give him Bear Island.
P-San said, "Gods, yeah. I can't abide Jorah. I can't stomach him in this." I like. See, I love Ian McGlenn. Is his name? In the
Ian
show.
Glenn.
He's lovely. In Glenn, yeah. And book Jorah. Oh man. And this thing about like just that he's such a sad sap. Like anyone could see how bad his second wife is. I mean, what do you like? So rather than be with you, she prefer become a prostitute, basically. That's how bad it was to be married to you.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, oh man.
So I wonder if she's still around. It sounds like she's joined she's possibly become this famous concubine. She fled to Lys, so
is he sterile?
No, because
is there something wrong with him though?
he had a well.
Not Sarah,
This was conveniently slipped into the story that Jorah actually had a first wife who was a Glover,
yes.
so it was a northern woman,
and she had 3 miscarriages.
Yeah, but she died. I think she died in childbirth. So Jorah at some. So I'm guessing that so did the child.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, is that a problem with Jorah because his second wife there's no mention of pregnancies?
No, there isn't. No, I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, possibly.
So it answered our question from last week. We were speculating that Jeor had joined the Night's Watch to make up for the dishonor of Jorah, but actually he'd already handed the reins over to Jorah, which I completely forgot. And then had gone to the Night's Watch.
Yeah.
So Jorah really is like the disaster son who
he just messed it all up.
Loses it all, loses everything for a younger, harder wife. Interestingly, she's a high tower.
Yes.
And that means that there were 3 kind of romantic northern relationships conducted around the same time, or at least the 3 people that were at Tower of Joy. They had 3 romantic relationships within their family. Like, so we had Kat, whose mother is a Went. She was supposed to be marrying Brandon, but then we have the Ashara Dane Ned thing, and also over in Bear Island you have Jorah and this Hightower girl.
Well,
just like it's just interesting how there's so many family connections, regardless of the alliance to the king.
Something was going on there, because I immediately thought, because what you've got here is Jorah talking about his second, like love at first sight, completely bowled over, just like, and threw himself down at Lord Hightower's feet to ask for a hand in marriage the very first time he ever saw her. And Lord Hightower agrees immediately to this marriage. Come on.
And why?
I mean, either she was an absolute, she sounds like a complete, like, high maintenance disaster.
Yeah.
I mean,
did
he
really? Daughters he had as well, so.
Yeah, did he really want to get rid of her that quickly on that basis, or was it he saw an opportunity to get into the north, and as part of this intermarrying north-south, maybe Hightower was part of something with Tywin and Hoster and.
So this must have been
that generation.
Said that it's before the first Ironborn rebellion. So, but it's between Robert's rebellion and the Ironborn rebellion, right? I just don't I still don't know how they just forgive one another so quickly. I don't know how anyone would send their daughter north at that time, but it's not that big a deal maybe. But Jorah obviously proved himself at the tourney that he was like a warrior and stuff, because he wins. So I guess maybe Hightower could be in his cups.
Hightower had like 10 kids, so
10 kids then.
So
he had to get rid of that multi-maiden.
Yeah, probably not fussed about who she married, particularly if she was a bit of a nightmare.
Where are you from? Bear Island? Haver.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
anyway.
Oh, you're all right. Okay. Yeah. Oh, you all right. Okay, you're down around Lannisport. Not far enough.
Yeah.
Bear Island. Yeah, Haver.
But just
are you sure you're not closer to the wall?
The fact that he, it's like he remortgaged to get singers to come to the island, and all this exotic stuff. She sounds like an absolute nightmare. I would be interested to see if we do ever see her in the story again. Last heard fleeing to Lys to potentially become a famous concubine. The only other thing that I wanted to point out in this section was where Jorah actually brings Daenerys a peach, and it's very descriptive the way she describes how she enjoys it. Yeah. So this is an
Oh,
example, and I've just kind of put a circle around Peach because it's like, okay, so we've got an example of one Peach that was really, really wanted and enjoyed, like in this chapter by Daenerys, but later on we get quite famously another Peach that's resoundingly rejected.
I don't think that's.
So
I don't think outside of the UK it's well known that what a peach is a symbol of.
mm,
In the UK, it's supposed to be a symbol of a woman's genitalia, right?
hmm
So I don't think that's common outside of the UK. I could be wrong.
yeah,
I only know it because of that English movie a few years ago, or like a long time ago in the 90s, I think. There was a movie called Peaches.
oh
Do you
right,
remember that?
yeah.
Yeah, it is actually. Now that you say it, it's quite.
Yeah, it's well, in this context with Jorah and Daenerys, it's pretty pornographic. But yeah, just this Peach, this.
But then she does think she can't imagine him in her, which is like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's one of those times where you're like, George, I don't think most girls think of most
No.
women.
No, I don't think that would have crossed her mind, really. No.
But yeah, especially after giving birth to some dragons, maybe. I don't know.
So we
yeah,
get these three, it kind of feels like three, the three wise men turn up.
Yeah.
At the birth
Before
of
we
the
do
dragons.
that, can we just talk about the three dragons and the fact that they eat cooked meat like humans? So we've talked about, the potential genetic links between dragons and humans. So that is interesting. The other thing I have a problem with her naming of the dragons after Viserys and Rhaegar. Why doesn't she name? And this is a big question for me with Dany in general. Why she doesn't think about her parents more, and why she doesn't name them after her parents, particularly her mother who died giving birth to her. But she thinks about a brother she names them after a brother she never even met.
I don't know. I mean, they're supposed to be genderless, aren't they? Dragons.
Yeah.
So maybe she just immediately thought of masculine names for them. I think she's always heard she's heard from a brother about her parents, but she's also heard some pretty horrible stuff about her dad being the Mad King. So,
but why Viserys and not her mother?
Yeah.
Like I feel that her mother gets, and it is interesting as we go into the Arya chapter later on, because we're going to meet Sir Amory, who actually killed her niece. She doesn't. There's certain people maybe she just didn't hear about them. I don't know, but I feel like I've known people who've lost their mother at a young age or lost their mother just as they were, in childbirth or whatever, and they think about them a lot.
Yeah.
And she doesn't think about her mother. I don't think she thinks about her much at all in this series. I think at one stage in Game of Thrones, she thought about what it must have been like for her mother, but that's it. Like, she doesn't really think. She's very like Kat in that sense.
Yeah.
Not thinking about her mother. But yeah, it's just one that I know she says she names one of the dragons after Viserys because it could become something he never could be or something like that. But I don't know. I have a bit of a problem with her name after Viserys. The other thing you mentioned as well, that no man would take the dragons from her, but we have very non-human things in the story as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be a gender thing.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. Human. Yeah.
Human. And then Quaithe and Karth, it's very brief at the end. Quaithe is from a Shadowbinder and has a lacquered wooden mask, which sounds
very mysterious.
But yeah, so that's it. That's all I have from the Dany chapter.
Yeah,
it's a decent introduction to her, but it's also an introduction that says just hold on. You're going to be taking in a lot more Dany information rather than Dany action. Just for the
yeah, and it's just that sense of all the suffering and loss. You know, she's losing people all the time. So by the time she sort of is able to rest and gather her strength, I think she realizes that this, you know, this is a tough journey for her.
Yeah, and from the red waste to the snow wastes, we move on to Jon.
Yeah,
and I totally agree with you. It's so deliberate, the placing of these two chapters. But I would give anyone a word of advice. If you haven't already, go check out what Whitewood looks like, this village, which at the center of this village is a heart tree, and the entire village is in the shade of this tree. And some amazing artwork is out there for this village. It's really, really beautiful, and just the description of it is amazing, and what it does to the guys around it. But I think this is the shortest chapter that we had this week, and yet we meet so many characters in this chapter, and in a way, it's like a prequel to the Arya chapter, in the sense that it kind of lays out all the characters the guys we lose in Arya's chapter could have been. And just like this is the present, and this is in the Arya chapter what's been stolen from them.
Yeah.
Before we move on, Pisan said Gurm writes complex female characters, but he doesn't write female relationships well. There are hardly any, but some later on, but still compared to male relationships, which there are many and varied.
Yes, that's true. We would get more like brother type relationships. We get, I think you're right. He does write. I agree. He does write.
Do you mean female relationships? Is that what you mean?
I think just he writes the characters well, but when it comes to relationships with other people, like Kat and her relationships with her family, and there seems to be something that's not quite.
That's true. It may have to do with the fact that a lot of his female characters are isolated because of the time. That a lot of them are, but that is true. I mean, Sansa doesn't make particularly good relationships with the women that are around her. It's true, yeah.
Yeah.
Although I feel like you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place trying to write women in this situation, because I'm teaching of Mice and Men at the moment, and Curly's wife of Mice and Men. The reason why you focus so much on her as a character is because she's isolated in a situation. But AU thinks it's just George, so maybe I'm just defending him too much. But yeah, female relationships are really complicated as well. I feel like female relationships, it would be very difficult for a man to write. Sorry, that makes sense. It's sexist, but I think they are complex characters, but it's hard to get the relationships right. Yeah, that's true. I totally agree. Okay, so we have Jon, and we're going to a completely female-free zone here. So, in fact, it's a people-free zone.
Yeah.
And I find Mormont is being particularly dumb in this chapter. He's bringing 200 men with him. Why do they have to bring 200 men with them? I don't understand this. They can't even afford that on the wall. He doesn't understand why, or he doesn't seem to understand why the wildlings would burn the bodies, and wishes they hadn't burned the bodies, because they could have told them what happened. And Jon is like, well, we know why they burned the bodies. My hands are burnt in proving this. And also, if Benjen is here, what would he make of all these, of everywhere being deserted? And Jon is like, well, we should be finding out why there's no one around. I feel like Mormont isn't, whether he's just not willing to vocalize this in front of everybody to get them worried. I don't know. It's just there's something very off about his leadership in this chapter. I feel I could be being a bit hard on him now, but
I don't know how many times Mormont has been beyond the wall. I'm guessing many times during his
that's a good
command.
question. Yeah,
but he doesn't. I think some people feel more, I wouldn't say comfortable is the word, but or even adapt, but I do feel that characters like John in particular in this chapter seems to have this intuition about the North and beyond the wall, and he seems to have more of an understanding of what's going on and why people would do the things they do, and just the layout and the landscape of everything. And it's kind of similar to the very first chapter, Bran's chapter way back in Game of Thrones, when they found the direwolves, and John seemed to have, again, much more of an intuition about the North and the men on the wall and why things would be happening the way they were happening. It says in this chapter, it's like he could feel the power that's there beyond the wall, and particularly that was kind of almost emanating from this huge weirwood at Whitetree. But I didn't get anything more from this chapter apart from, again, just picking up on what the Raven says, old and corn. I don't know what, if anyone, he says corn a lot, so that must equate to something, and I still haven't quite figured out what the kind of code word for corn is yet, but that's the most overused word. It's funny because in this chapter as well, the Mormont says, in this stilted, weird leadership that he's got in this chapter, that the Ravens never say anything worth hearing, which of course probably means that they are saying something.
Yeah. If Mormont says it, if any Mormont says anything.
Yes, yeah. Some of the, he talks about some of the Ravens can say snow. And John observes that Sam seems to be feeling quite brave beyond the wall. Again, some people feel just more in tune with it, I guess, and some people just feel way out of their comfort zone beyond the wall, and I think possibly Mormont is one of those.
So there's something that I hadn't noticed before. I don't think it came up in Game of Thrones. The fact that snow means death to many people in the North, or often means death. I don't think that's been mentioned much, but it's a massive foreshadowing for a lot of things, but mainly for John in dance. Something as well that, like, you might think, I think the reader is supposed to think that perhaps at this stage that perhaps the wildlings are running from the creatures we saw in the prologue of A Game of Thrones. But I mean, we find out later that Mance is actively recruiting people and bringing people together. Funnily enough, Mance hasn't been mentioned here, and yet he's mentioned in Bran's first chapter in Game of Thrones. So it is interesting that he's like the mystery character still, and seemingly a mystery to Mormont. She doesn't mention him at all. Again, I'm not. I think when you hear Jorah's story as well in the last chapter, it's like, how smart are these Mormonts? How isolated are they? And we still don't have an answer as to why Jorah is even on the wall, why he even went there. Does anyone in the chat want to give a theory on that? Ian wants core and code theories, and Ethan said that I'm never a fan of the power blood relationship, and I think that's because Iron Throne asked, is there power in Northern blood? I think there's a power in Jon's blood for different reasons. And the Dragon Valyrian connection will probably never get an answer to. I agree with you. I don't think we're going to get answers to those kind of questions in this series, but I think George has a lot of books or anthologies, or he has a lot of side projects like the history of the Night's Watch, and I'd say there's a lot of side projects in the pipelines that you do not want him to do right now because you get distracted. But I'd imagine there are lots of books that would maybe give us insight into those kind of things. Also, there's some things that we might not want answers to, because once you get an answer to it, then that's it. There's no more tinfoil. But yeah, I don't think I have much here. I don't think I have anything else.
No.
Yeah, I think it's just John's instincts are excellent.
Just a general sense of unease beyond the wall, the fact that there are no wildlings there, so there's this kind of tension mounting, definitely.
And it is a nice lead into the Arya chapter. Sonny says that I think Bloodraven is behind Gior's decision to join the Night's Watch. Well, he might as well be, because I don't think we know, and it's a massive question. Also, like Jorah, he left Bear Island in Jorah's hands without even Jorah securing an heir, which I know doesn't really matter in Bear Island because clearly women are allowed to take over as well. But it is a bit of a strange one. So it may have something to do with the Illuminati and bringing, as I theorized last week, making sure that the actual king is at the wall, and that he knows about Jon. And that there's actually a bigger conspiracy. We'll get into more conspiracies, I guess, in Bran's chapter. But right now we're into our action-packed chapter.
That's exactly what I've put at the top of my page. Yeah. Action-packed.
Yeah, so you go first. You go and let us know what you thought of Arya.
Definitely. This is the first experience really where Arya is really in battle and facing real peril. So this is where they stumble across this deserted town, again similar to Jon and Dany's chapters. But on the way there, Arya thinks about old Nan's tales about Harrenhal, because they're in the vicinity, and ghosts at Harrenhal and the stories that old Nan used to tell, and that's quite telling, because obviously, as we know, as we go further into Arya's story, she kind of becomes the ghost at Harrenhal with all her antics when she gets there with the weasel soup and things like that, and her little deals with Jack and Hagar. But bodies in the water as well, so there's lots of death and destruction, bloated bodies in the water, in the rivers. And again, that just made me think of Lady Stoneheart. So they arrive at the Holdfast Keep, and there's this connection with wolves and wolf dreams, and her connection to Nymeria, who I think stays in the Riverlands throughout all of this. Ever since she was abandoned by Arya, I don't think she's travelled very far beyond the Riverlands. We know that she was there when everything happens later on with Cat, and the stories that people tell about this horde of wolves led by this giant she-wolf. And again, I don't know if it's a proximity thing, but Arya does seem to be having quite a lot of wolf dreams, and she wakes up to the sound of a wolf howling that she, it's almost like, you must have heard that. And did anyone hear that? Anyone else hear that? That wolf howling? And it's like, no, Arya, just you're the only one that's hearing it. And it's like so the connection to the wolf is there, and it was part of a dream. But this could be a way of, given what happens right next in this chapter, this could be a way of Nymeria warning, almost giving her a kind of like first alarm bell that, trouble is on its way, Arya. And she's trying to kind of, present that message to her, portray that message to her. But so then the Lannister men turn up at this Holdfast, and like I said, it's Arya's first experience of a fight. Have you got anything up to this point before things start to go a bit wild?
Just that Yoren trying to get to Harrenhal, and the dramatic irony here that's built in for us, that we think he's going to run into Tywin, and he doesn't. which we'll get to, but just that idea that he has this large group with him of boys, and we know the dangers that are in this area. And coming off the John chapter, you realize how ill-equipped and how bad the instincts are. I did anyway, of Mormont, like the leader of the Night's Watch. And yet Yoren is going into this really dangerous territory with young boys and thinks that he'll be grand. Like, it's fine. There's no problem here. But we know the dangers that are out there. And it's just, from the moment this chapter starts, you're like, oh, fuck, there is so much danger right now. There's no way they're getting out of this. But yeah, I was trying to come up with an interesting name for the warning warging, you know, I couldn't come up with anything, you know, for Arya. I was trying to WW, I couldn't think of anything. But yeah, so yeah, I don't have anything up to that point. Just Yoren's yeah, which we'll get into again, like Yoren's misplaced belief that people actually respect what the Night's Watch is.
Yeah. But I mean, he's had 30 years of this. This has been his experience for his most of his career, has been traveling through Westeros, being you know, seen favorably, especially by the Northern Lords. And he even if he realizes the situation they're in, he probably has no clue how to deal with it, because it's so different from what he's used to.
So if he's had 30 years of experience, so that means that during Robert's Rebellion and all the other kind of any other conflicts throughout that 30-year period, it's never been more dangerous for him to be traveling this road. Or is it just because he has Arya and Gendry with him? Or is it because it's the Lannisters? Like, is this really trying to show us this is the most dangerous time Westeros has faced? Robert's Rebellion was not a patch at what they're going to go through now.
I think all three of those things is definitely showing us. It just it's quite sad actually that Yoren is so out of his depth and doesn't really know what to do. Just the you know, when it all happens, and he kind of you just question his decisions all the way through it, really. And then the only thing that he can think to say when it all starts is defend the wall, which is kind of like the wall, you know. And it's like, this is going to be you kind of feel like they're at the wall, but they're not at the wall, but they're defending the wall, you know. It's this kind of, and they were heading to the wall. So this is probably the only experience that they will get of defending the wall.
I just love Ion Throne's new jingle. It's the most dangerous time. I love it. No, it's
like the yellow brick road is like the King's Road.
Yeah, it does make us worry. It makes me worry, obviously, as a reader. If you're watching out for Jon's party, you're going to be, because I have this image of like Arya and her mates with like you know, a couple of chairs out in the backyard with like a sheet thrown over it, and they're in a fort, and that's what Yoren is basically asking them to defend. That's like
pretty much, pretty much.
And you know, the idea that like we know that there's a lot of danger beyond the wall. So if this is the danger that they're getting in the Riverlands with people that they're supposed to be helping to protect, what kind of danger is Jon in right now in that seemingly short, innocuous chapter? And I'm glad that we don't really get to focus on it too much the first time you read this, because you really are just focusing on Arya with her wolf dreams, her wolfing.
Yeah,
but I can't think of a good name. But yeah, so if you want to keep going with what happens to Arya and her mates.
Yeah, P-Sand is saying people forget that under Robert's reign things were actually good, then things go to shit 2 seconds after he dies. That's absolutely right. The time that all this is happening, it escalates, you know, it's like that, whoa, that escalated quickly. It did. And especially the butchery and savagery that's going on with the Mountain and the mummers, what are they called? Just the creatures that Tywin has roaming around the Riverlands and just causing absolute mayhem. To draw Rob out, and there's, you know, so there's a whole bigger picture politically, but what Arya's seen is the fallout of that as she's journeying north, is just bodies lying in the wake of this left, right, and centre.
And they actually have absolutely no reason when Sir Amory comes up. Like, why are you attacking these guys? There's absolutely no reason for you to be attacking these guys. It's just because you're allowed to fulfill every sociopathic, psychopathic fantasy that you have. Tywin has basically picked the most horrible people. And like, this guy killed, what, 2 or 3 year old? How old was Rhaenys Targaryen when he killed her? Was it Rhaenys?
Yeah, she was just a baby, I think.
And just that, like, that is completely highlighted in Arya trying to get that 2-year-old kid out of there as well. Like, in the back of Arya's mind, even though she doesn't put a voice to it, she probably knows that that's the name of the guy that killed the Targaryen child. That there must be some part of her that knows that from her history. So she doesn't want to save that little girl, but she does because she has to. I do like how Yoren, and that scene as well with the kid, I can't remember his name. He looks down and one of the other kids is stabbed and he's like, oh no, he's gone. And then he realizes he's stabbed, that he's been shot as well. Like, he's mortally injured as well. It's horrible. But how Yoren tells Arya, Yoren tells Arya to escape through the tunnel. And that's a very common theme with Arya, tunnels in general. And I can't remember, did you mention this last week about tunnels under Winterfell or something?
Yes. I think we talk about Gandalf and things like that.
But
that's how far the tunnels go.
That's a common theme with Arya. Tunnels, like she the tunnels in King's Landing, she dreams of the crypts under Winterfell a lot. And this is obviously going to be something really important, and it links in with Tyrion's chapter next, which is also referencing tunnels. There's an underground kind of network.
There's something about the journeys that they're all taking. All of the Dany, Jon, Arya, you know, these are the characters that are on the road, they're on the move. Then you've got characters like Tyrion and Sansa, who are rooted in a particular location. So the development of the story feels like it's a different pace because there's not a lot going on around them necessarily. But within Arya's chapters, there's the whole landscape of where she is and where she's traveling to. Same with Dany, same with Jon. I remember reading this for the very first time when I read the books, and thinking, there were several times when at the very end of Arya's chapter, you think, that's it, she's dead. And this was the first time, and then the other one later on with the Hound, where the Hound hits her in the back of the head with an axe. And I think, so twice, you know, I'm used to at least twice those Arya chapters where it's like, oh my God, she's actually dead. How's she going to come back from that? Because this is a gust of fire coming after her, you know, or in front of her, or wherever, where she is in this tunnel. She's in real danger.
She is. And Sonny has said that Amory is looking for Beric, which you know makes sense, and I guess it does foreshadow the connection there later on. But I feel like Arya in this chapter as well, it ends with her kissing the mud in the tunnel and not being sure what she's thankful for, or who she's thankful to, or anything like that. Because again, and not for the first time, Arya has a very important relationship severed, a relationship with an older man severed. This is the third time that's happened to her. And again, is this the third time she's killed or the second time she's killed?
Second, I think.
This is the second. It's her second kill. Okay. I couldn't remember. Was there another one? But yeah. And again, just so much for a 9-year-old to be handling.
So what happens? I know that she throws the axe into the cage for Jaqen and Rog and Biter, and they do they. I know that they escape because we know them. We see them turn up later on in the story, but is the next time we see them? That's it. They're at Harrenhal and they've joined the Lannister men, or am I mixing that up with the TV show? Or do they? What? How do they get out from Harrenhal?
I don't know what happens to Biter, and maybe somebody else in the chat can help.
I think they end up being Lannister men as well. Although
Biter was used
somehow they end up in the
Lannister guards.
What in the Bloody Mummers, don't they? Much later on, like Feast, when Brienne runs into them. So maybe they. No, I can't either.
Biter, yeah, you're right. I think you're right. I think you're right. Yeah.
I think as we go into, I just want to point out that it's been. This is why we're doing this reread, because it's been several years. So some of the details of what happens next. I know that at this stage there's a lot of change in allegiances in that area, and people switching sides quite a bit around Tywin and his little group of sellswords and the Bloody Mummers, and there's a few. There's quite a lot going on, and then that's without getting into the whole Brotherhood without banners and what their agenda is and what they're up to. So it all gets quite complicated from here on in, but I just couldn't remember.
Secondary characters. AU says, "Of course, you're right." All of those not even secondary characters, like fourth or fifth, like level characters, I get really confused with sometimes. What do you think is the significance is that there seems to be so much chaos around the God's Eye? A lot of it is happening around this area. There's a lot of turmoil. Seems to be it seems to be spreading from this area in particular.
Well, if you think of the Children of the Forest as a race and the connection to the old gods, the God's Eye is kind of like the capital city, isn't it? That's where everything centers, and there's again, along with White Tree and this huge weirwood that we see here, that's really quite scary when you think about it. I mean, this is the first time that we get this sense of the weirwoods being actually quite monstrous and scary. They've not just got, like, previously in the story, if you were just reading the books and you hadn't watched the TV show, it's kind of like, oh, these trees have got faces in, so that then there's some kind of communication thing there. This is like, Jesus Christ. You mean you can throw an entire sheep in there? What's going on? And all these, like, this blood and the bones and everything. And then you've got that sense of, we know somewhere in the story that there's this really old ancient grove of weirwoods that are possibly even the first weirwoods, and maybe there are even some Children of the Forest still there, and there's this order of green men that were there to protect these ancient weirwoods. So I think that's and then you've got the wolves again, the dire wolves that are connected to the old gods that are in that proximity. So I think I think that's maybe one reason why it's so chaotic.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not saying that they're fighting back necessarily in any way. Maybe the wolves are, but maybe they're just sending out something, some sort of old gods magic that's just disrupting.
I kind of feel like the God's Eye is a bit misleading. I think if you think of Westeros as a body, with the wall being the eyes of that body, and the God's Eye maybe being the heart, and King's Landing being the bowels. Like, you know, the way there's that saying that all death starts in the bowels. Like, most disease can be traced back to the bowels and what you've taken in over your life.
Yeah.
So that's like the corruption starts in the bowels of King's Landing.
Yeah.
But it affects the heart, and it's the eyes then, like, that are trying to figure out what's going on, and then it's all in the brains. Then might be the walkers and mance and all that kind of thing in the start. But
so basically, the Riverlands is having a heart attack.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've got things like
way too much cholesterol.
Yes.
In diet.
Well, it's got way too many dead bodies in its arteries, like in the Green Fort and the Red Fort, and you know, it's you know, that I suppose the riverways there are the main arteries. So,
and it is interesting that in Bran's chapter we have Howland Reed mentioned again, and it's one of those. He's the biggest, blackest hole in that part of the world. What the hell are they doing at the neck, or what the hell are they doing in how? Where's Howland Reed again? In the what's the name of Howland Reed's?
Oh, Greywater Watch.
Greywater Watch. What are they doing there? Like, what is it? What's going on there?
Well, now I'm imagining that they've got the defibrillators there.
Yeah.
And they're ready to kind of like
cholesterol is trying to fight all the bad. I don't know. It's like I'm taking the analogy too far. But,
yes, there's a blockage at the twins.
yeah, too much plaque. So, well, it would make Winterfell the mouth, which kind of makes sense. But yeah, especially when Manderley gets there in Bran's chapter. But yeah, the Arya chapter is really action packed, but when you actually take a step back, it's so tragic as well. The waste and the loss of life and how brutal. It's also a big kind of red flag as to, and we have it with the phrase as well in Bran's chapter. Tywin Lannister doesn't play fair, and nobody that he's with will play fair. And there's no, like, nobody's going to help. And we're going to get that in a later Tyrion chapter as well. With actually, I think it's Tyrion 4 when Alistair turns up with the hand.
Okay.
Just that idea that like nobody gives a shit about the Night's Watch.
Yeah.
Except for the reader.
Yes. Yeah.
But it is really hard. It's just the idea that Arya is being driven further underground as well, literally.
Well, she's kind of free range now, isn't she? She's not, you know, no one's there kind of looking after her, so she's out on her own, which is again quite scary.
I think she's able to handle it.
Yeah.
She's looking after a 2-year-old. Suddenly she's a single 9-year-old mother.
Yeah. But again, that kind of solidifies for us as the reader. You know, you get this very basic, you need as a reader to kind of feel as though you need to put people into boxes of that's a good guy, that's a bad guy, that's the, you know, these are the characters that are. And this again is another tick in the box for Arya as being a hero. She's, you know, she's saving this young girl who's annoying the crap out of her, crying all the time, but yet she's compelled to save her. So she's she's the hero.
When you think of a 2-year-old, it's so horrible. So that's Arya. Do you have anything else that you want to say about Arya's chapter?
No, ready to move on.
So, out of one tunnel and into another. Although before we get to that tunnel, we have Cersei's
outburst.
What she's been doing with her tunnel, and how Stannis has let the whole kingdom know what Cersei has been up to. I have a bit of a question here. So Cersei wants to instantly kill anybody spreading Stannis's egregious lies.
She has
I love Tyrion's observation that wow, she's really convincing when she's lying about the truth. But the idea that Littlefinger says, no, if you do that, then, or is it Tyrion that says, if you do that, then everybody's going to believe that's the truth?
Well, it's Tyrion. Tyrion says, you know, don't, but whoa, stop having such an extreme reaction, because people will think, why is she, you know, why is she protesting so much?
And then Littlefinger says, well, we should spread the rumor that Hatchface is Shireen's father. But that's probably just as bad as killing anybody. So I think Littlefinger again is playing both sides off one another, because actually what they should do in that situation is not say anything. They should just ignore it.
There's no need for that suggestion. He just knows he's taking the opportunity, because he knows, like, basically Cersei had such a ridiculous extreme reaction to this that anybody would think, okay, then that's obviously true, because she's had such this extreme reaction. Littlefinger's taking advantage of that to spread some ridiculous rumor,
which like you say, the effect as
that you know, you needn't have gone there. Just doing what Tyrion suggested, which is just don't even go there. Just leave it. It's not, you know, it's just a ridiculous thing that nobody will believe. People will only believe it if you come out and start root and stem, you know, destroying everyone that has it. She's terrified of her father finding out. So she's just gone into this blind panic where she immediately absolves any kind of decision making to Tyrion, which is comical. What should I do? What should I do? What do you think I should do? Well, what would you do in this situation? So she's very happy to have, you know, she's like, yes, when, you know, agreeing with whatever Tyrion says. It's just, the thing that I got from this was Littlefinger's just what a petty thing to do, how ridiculously petty to...
Well, it doesn't make him look
petty. No, it doesn't.
Cersei looks petty.
It's just the idea of it, of spreading this. It's just so nasty and malicious, and like, why? Like, just to come up with something like that on the spot. Like, oh, well, what you should do is, like, say that Patchface has fathered Shireen, and, you know, just... And again, it's absolutely true. It's like, this is like, you know, tabloids, isn't it? If you say something that's so ridiculously outrageous, it's...
Well, Littlefinger is the Daily Mail of Westeros.
Yes, he is, definitely. Yeah.
I don't know what the equivalent is in America, National Enquirer or something.
Yeah.
Probably that hard.
But I just thought it was, actually quite a petty thing to do, but again, such a massive impact in doing that. And she doesn't seem very capable at all, really, Cersei. She doesn't seem to have thought about strengthening the defenses of King's Landing beyond just getting everybody in armor, which is, you know, she's not thinking big, like grand scale, like Tyrion is beginning to with things like the chain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which we don't get a payoff until Storm, right?
No, it's much later on. But we get a good sense here of, again, what the smaller characters think. So we get the armorers gathered together, and Tyrion realizes when they're describing that they can make him some armor with a demon helm, and he's like, okay, clearly, wow, this is what people think of me, like, in the streets.
Yeah, and you see, this is the problem. Tyrion is allowing that to, in some ways, he's allowing that to take over his narrative as hand, because Cersei knows that Tyrion knows the truth. And no matter how much she hates him, she has got to see that his loyalty is way more likely than Littlefinger's. Like, why
Yeah.
don't, like, what is it? Littlefinger is clearly already sowing seeds for making the Lannisters look bad by putting in a plan that Cersei will accept because it's vengeful and petty and
Yes,
bitchy
exactly.
and nasty. He knows Cersei's going to go for it.
Yeah.
It's not like he didn't say Davos. He said Patchface. It's like it's even seedier and like humiliating for all of them. Like it's much worse than saying Jaime and Cersei are sleeping together in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But the idea that she still doesn't trust Tyrion, and I know we've had this conversation, especially based on the last series of the show. We don't trust Tyrion at all because I think at the heart of it, Tyrion is a Lannister, and he's more Lannister than people want to admit. And I think he's loyal as a Lannister. And even though he knows that about Jaime and Cersei, he is saying we're not going to do anything, and doing nothing is the best course of action. And he's still trying to save Lannister face by feeding the people. I know that's his job as Hand, but it's like I don't know if Tywin will come in and do what Tyrion is doing, already planning.
Well, it's the tie back to Theon again, isn't it? The desperately wanting approval from the father.
But it's the only thing
which is a very Lannister thing to do.
But also, it's not even approval from his father. It's the only thing that garners him any respect from anybody is the fact that he's a Lannister. Like without that name, he's nothing. So it's not really. It doesn't really have anything to do with the people in his family. It's about the name. I think. I think it's more about. Like I know there's daddy issues there for sure, but I do think it's more about the fact that this is the only thing in my life that has ever given me anything of value.
You could be saying exactly the same thing about Theon, though.
Absolutely, yeah, that's true. The fact that he's even a hostage, otherwise he would have, if the rebellion had never happened, he'd be the third son in line. Yeah, he'd be a nobody in the Iron Islands. Yeah.
So later on in this chapter, we get to Chataya's. And we get a bit more information about different cultures and religions. So we get to find out a bit more about the Summer Isles and how they. I thought that was a very good description of her brothel and justifying its existence, because it's about worshipping God and worshipping bodies, and God wouldn't have given us these earthly desires. So Tyrion instantly feels completely at home. Obviously, he thinks this is the best place in the world ever. This is obviously one of Varys's main, sources of information and alliances, because this clearly was all set up by Varys. So we're led to believe that something saucy is going to be happening with Alalaya, which is Chataya's daughter. And actually what happens is he's led through a wardrobe, which becomes a tunnel. And that's how he gets out of King's Landing. My question, who was the hand? Who was the other King's Hand that Varys was talking about?
I guess in Tywin. That's what I think. I think
it's got to have been somebody who now.
Yeah, it has to be recent.
It's got to have been fairly recent. It can't have been ancient times, like when the Red Keep was built, because Varys refers to the old hand being kind of it sort of alludes to it being in his lifetime, because it describes him.
The hand to another king or something like that, isn't it?
He describes this other hand as potentially treasonous, like, oh, it was another. So that makes you think, well, you wouldn't have known that unless it was somebody fairly recent who was in your lifetime. So it could only have really possibly been very recently two people.
Jon Arryn.
Now Jon Arryn could be an interesting prospect because well, there were many questions that you had, particularly, Kat, about Jon Arryn in the Eyrie
A
and
lot.
what kind of man he was, and how Ned and Robert remember him.
Including
I mean,
the fact that he may have been treasonous himself.
I mean, he comes across as being, to the reader, initially quite frail, older gentleman, very well respected by Ned, so must have been this good guy. But really, we're only led to believe that because of the obvious age difference between, he was an old man compared to when he was married to Lysa and then, trying to conceive. But maybe this was, I mean, John Arryn had been Hand of the King for quite a while, hadn't he?
Yeah.
Maybe he was up
14,
to
15 years, something
yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Maybe he was up to all sorts of things, and maybe there is a.
No, we said. I think we said John Connington or John Con we said John Arryn in the chat. They thought we were talking about.
Oh,
It's
right.
John Arryn. We're definitely talking about. Yeah.
John Arryn. So yeah, maybe there's a bigger part of John Arryn. John Arryn seems like a mysterious character to me.
I think John Arryn is a complete. I think there's something completely off about that guy. There's something I don't. I still think him and Stannis were planning more than just revealing that there was incestuous sheets.
Yeah.
I think there's much more to that. I do think though I don't know, I think it would probably more likely be Tywin. Which, is there potential for more bastards to be out there? If that's the case.
Do you think that? I'm just trying to think now. I think in the depths of my mind, I've kind of had some of these theories before about John Arryn and particularly this secret tunnel that was used by the other King's Hand. And I seem to remember somehow linking it to Littlefinger at some point, like maybe John Arryn had fathered a bastard. And this, there was all these kind of secrets. Maybe Peter Baelish is John Arryn's Littlefinger. There's all sorts of potential. There's all sorts of things that we don't know about. But this is interesting that this tunnel was built for another King's Hand. So what the hell was he up to? And who was that King's Hand?
I do think though. I know they said John Con is gay. I wouldn't be surprised if John Arryn was. I wouldn't be surprised if there was something between him and Blackfish or something. Like it wouldn't be beyond the realms of possibility, because I really don't think Sweet Robert is his child at all. So it wouldn't. I don't know, but just because the tunnel is there doesn't mean they're using the tunnel necessarily, even though it's going into a brothel. It doesn't mean the brothel for that purpose. A brothel is a really good place to have a meeting and know that nobody's going to want to see you there, as Tyrion is used to, Varys used to,
That's true.
Ned was made to go there, and he didn't want to go there, and he nearly kills Littlefinger in Game of Thrones when he has to go into it. And Cat hides there, so it's not automatically whoever uses that used it for the purposes of having sex. It's a lot of effort to go to just for the ride.
Yeah.
The other thing is, it may not have been that the tunnel was used to go to the brothel. It may have been that the tunnel was used to get out of the brothel, if you know what I mean. Like it may not have been. It may have been used to get somebody to, which, I mean, I think Tywin does make more sense because of our Shay conversation as well, and how we believe that Shay is definitely in Tywin's pocket from the beginning.
Yeah.
Tywin and Bran and Shay work together. Missing lots of comments here. P-Sam said, John Arryn and Stannis would have had to tell Robert, which would basically result in the extermination of House Lannister, as Bob's Furious would have been epic. Yeah, P-San said it could have been used to enter the other way, enter the brothel and end up outside. Could be used to avoid spies. Yeah, no, that's what I think. I think it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody trying
It's
to
just
get
a secret inner sanctum for secret
it's
meetings.
such a throwaway line.
Mm.
And again, because it's coming from Varys and with that riddle that we had a couple of weeks ago, I just think it's another way of Varys saying, do you know Shay? Do you know the way you've got a hard on for the prostitute in there? Why don't you just go sleep with her? Don't go back to this one. Don't stop going back to Shay. But of course, Bran has his claws in as well. So Varys, the creepy thing about Varys is he doesn't let up onto the skies even when Tyrion is with him. So creepy.
Like a method actor.
Like you can never know who Varys is.
Yeah.
It's really disarming. And I think that's probably why Tyrion isn't seeing the red flags that Varys is laying out for him.
You know why it's so bloody difficult to try and interpret these books and theorize about this is because if you haven't got faceless men, you've got people in disguise left, right, and center. So it's just, how are you ever going to be able to really, you can just scratch the surface. Like you say, just that throwaway line opens up an entire other story and kind of like sliding doors into this like alternate, well, what was happening then and what does that mean? And did they, you know, it's just the so many implications from that.
Yeah, and AU says that that's probably why we didn't get a Stannis POV. I mean, I think it could have been, if Jon Arryn built that tunnel, it definitely could have been a place for him and Stannis to meet. You know, they could both use the tunnel potentially. And you don't have, like, who's going to want to hear two old fellas riding at a brothel?
Yeah.
So and I feel like Varys knows about this tunnel, and I think it's a way of Varys to get at Littlefinger. This is Littlefinger's bread and butter, you know, using brothels to gain power. And here's Varys behind his back with this tunnel that like gives him access to a brothel, and it's gained more information for Varys and more. And now he has the new hand in his pocket straight away, because he's using prostitutes and he's using brothels to get to Tyrion as well.
But Tyrion begins to realise, in fact, he's not even beginning to realise, it's just becoming very clear to him that the scope of Varys's power and influence and potential and all of the kind of little seeds that he's sown here, there and everywhere. And Tyrion describes him as either, he can't figure out whether Varys is his best friend or his best enemy. And Varys says, well, you know, ditto. And that kind of continues all the way through. As the reader, you never really quite know whose side. Are they on each other's side? Are they just taking advantage of it? You know, it's just, you never know.
We'll never know with Varys. We know what Littlefinger's on Littlefinger's side.
Yeah.
But I don't think we'll ever know with Varys.
Well, he always says for the realm, for the realm, for the realm, and then we get for the children in that particular chapter.
I think Varys will be until the end.
Me too.
Yeah, so that's Tyrion 3. Do you have anything else for that Tyrion chapter?
No. We're on to the last one.
Our last chapter, which is a Bran chapter. I think this is our longest chapter, or maybe the Theon one was. I assumed that we'd see Theon show up in this chapter. Actually, I thought when I saw the chapters for this week, I was like, oh, maybe I've just worked that out really well, and that Theon will show up now in this chapter, but he doesn't.
I don't think it's the next chapter either.
No, I think it's for a while. I was being very wishful thinking, hoping that I'd worked it out. Just completely accidentally. So we have a harvest feast, which, if you think of like Lammas festivals and harvest festivals in this part of the world, especially, like they tend to be the most joyful of events. And this is the most bloody, depressing thing, especially if you're a woman reading this chapter. Because Hornwood, by the way, dirtiest name ever, Hornwood. But it's just like, she's just treated like a piece of meat. And this is where we get our introduction into Ramsay Bolton. This is where we get our first introduction to him. We find out quite a lot about him and instantly hate him in this chapter. It opens with him from, I think Hornwood tells him that you know, the Bolton's bastard he has eyes on her land, and that you know, there's rumors that he even killed Ramsay's trueborn, or Roos's trueborn son. And then later on, we find out that Ramsay is refusing to leave Dreadfort to come to the Harvest Festival. Everybody else has either gone north or gone south to Rob, or they're at Winterfell, but Ramsay's refusing to leave. So it's a massive red flag from beginning to end with Ramsay. And yeah, we have Wyman Manderley and setting himself up as a very astute political planner and very astute, like, kind of organizer as well. Like, you know, instantly saying, you know, we'll need ships, we'll need to organize ourselves, currency, whatever else. Like, we'll need it all. And Lewin sticking his oar in again. Yeah, we'll send a letter about that. That's fine. And also Lewin treating Bran like a child, and then Manderley coming along and saying, you know, oh, no, you're not late, we're all early, kind of thing. And again, just that massive, for me, a massive kind of like, what the hell are the Maesters? Like, what is Lewin actually up to here? This is why it's going to be easy for Theon to take Winterfell, because...
Well, there's no one in charge. No. Everything is like, well, we'll write to Rob and we'll ask Rob, and it's like, okay, so Rob is the King of the North in the middle of battle, and also he's getting letters regularly. We you know, how much of the harvest, a tenth, a fifth, do you think that the Glovers need to be? No, somebody needs to be in charge at Winterfell, and it's ridiculous. But again, I think, even though on the surface it looks like a fairly boring chapter, we just get introduced to, like, over and over again, different northern houses and northern lords, kind of linked around Lady Hornwood. It seems quite boring. They're talking about the harvest, and they're talking about you know, the kind of economics and repairing and getting themselves all organized for winter. That's what it seems like on the surface. But what you've got here is a massive influx of fairly powerful northern houses all meeting together in Winterfell. And so it's a kind of gathering. It's a gathering.
It's a huge deal. Huge.
It's a gathering of northern lords. So they have. We don't know what's. This chapter is through the eyes of Bran, who's a child. So he's thinking about how he wants to be a knight, and he's looking at all the, you know, everyone who's coming to visit, all the guests that are coming to visit, and how he needs to. You know, he's more worried about his image of the Walders laughing at him because he's got his silly, you know. Wait a minute,
Claire, you're saying Bran is a child, but you mean that when couples are together, the man doesn't just lie on top of the woman?
It's a very, very Bran way of looking at things in this chapter. So you don't know how, you know, this could be the beginning of the Great Northern Conspiracy.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's all in this chapter.
Yeah.
They all know what's going on, independent of what Winterfell knows.
Yes, yeah. So there's little clues of things like marriage alliances. Obviously, that's the kind of political stuff. But it seems like some of them are already thinking about Rob's replacement, about what happens after Rob goes. and who's going. You know, there's a political vacuum clearly.
Oh, totally.
And one of the things that I completely forgot that I was reminded of in this chapter, because Bran was referred to twice as Prince, and I was like, that kind of, I had to stop for a second. It was like, oh yeah, actually, of course he is Prince. But yes, yeah. But I don't think when he leaves Winterfell, he's never referred to as Prince again.
Osha, so. Does she refer to him as my little prince, or does she say
maybe.
my little lord?
I think my little lord sounds.
No, I'm getting mixed up with the show.
Maybe, yeah, maybe I can't remember
the show.
But it kind of, I was taken aback. I'd forgotten that Bran was. I'd forgotten that Bran was a prince.
But even the fact that Lewin says, "Oh, Mira and Jojen call him prince," according to Pisand, and he and also saying that all of the eyes of the North should have been on possible invasion. And I think they are, because Mandaree is saying, well, if we're an independent nation now, we need our own warships. And instantly Bran says, oh, warships. Oh, yeah, I can see myself captaining a warship. And the people are there to hear from the Prince of Winterfell. And Lewin says, shut up, you don't say anything. You keep quiet now when we go in there. Don't you speak to anybody. But they're there to see the prince. They're there to get, even if it's a child, they're there to, at least to have,
mobilize power.
Their ideas recognized.
Yeah.
Not have a letter sent to Rob.
Yeah.
And then have them recognized and wait. How long does that take? For a letter to go all the way to Rob, Rob to think about it, fight with Cat over it, and then come back. And then go back to Winterfell, and then go back over to the Mandaree.
It's ridiculous.
It's so rude. It's really rude.
Yeah, it's incompetent. Pisan saying here the North is House Manwoody and House Hornwood need to unite Dawn.
That's an interesting.
And the North. Oh yeah. I mean, what's screaming in this chapter is, oh my God, considering what happens to her, and such a sad. You really get a sense of, oh my God, this woman is just so just lost and tired, and she just, even when she turns up, she's just like, can I deal with this another time?
She did her duty. She had the air.
She does. Yeah, she does everything. If you want me to get married, I'll get married. And they even say to her, they assure her that she will be safe. Oh my God, what happened to her was horrific. So quite clearly, she should have, and there was a massive, ample opportunity here to get this sorted out. She should have married a Manderley, or she should have married an Umber. She should have married a Northern Lord. And then there's this interesting story later on about the Tall Hearts who want to foster a nephew who's got Hornwood blood with her, in the hope that eventually he inherits those lands. So I've just kind of put, a side note here. Who is the Hornwood bastard? I mean, he's named as Lauren Snow, as somebody who's 12 years old and brave, but I'm just making a note of who all these northern bastards are, because you've got, as you said, introduction of Ramsay referred to as Ramsay the Bastard, and we get all the backstory and the horror story about Reek and this, what might they be hunting in the woods, and
nobody is listening to her.
No,
she says, this guy, I'm telling you, this guy. And even
so they're saying, don't worry, you'll be safe. You'll be safe. Thanks for coming, and thanks for letting us know all your troubles. Don't you worry about it. You'll be safe. And yet they're not sorting it out. No. They just keep saying, we'll ask Rob, or we'll ask Lady Hornwood. She's already said, if you need me to marry, I'll get married. Whatever, I don't really think she's that bothered. She's just completely tight. She's lost a husband and a son, and she's got nobody to defend her lands. And they don't sort it out enough to secure that. They promise that just the last moments of that woman's life, she must have just felt so bitter and let down by all of these Northern Lords.
The fact that they think it's okay for Ramsay to not send any representative of the Bolton family to Winterfell for this massive northern meeting, and they're probably thinking to themselves, "Oh, that guy is illegitimate. He doesn't have the balls to come face us." No, he has bigger balls to stay there, and you need to actually go and figure out why he hasn't come yet and what's going on. The fact that they think it's okay to accept that there's rumors of a guy hunting people potentially. It's so wrong, and I just there's a lot of people.
They should demand that the Boltons or a contingency or some representative from the Boltons comes to Winterfell,
and that they can't just demand that some senior representative is at Winterfell as an advisor. Now that Bran is there with Lewin and Roderick, well, if they're an independent nation, they also need a small council at the seat of power. They also need somebody to be there.
So we're paying attention to who's there, what potential alliances could be made. Also, we've got to pay attention to who's glaringly not there, like the Boltons. Also, I think the Flints were mentioned. Now, the Flints are an interesting family because they've got, I think I remember listening to a Preston video once years ago when he was talking about there's different types of Flints, I think, and they're in different areas. They're kind of split quite geographically. And I think he was alluding to the Flints maybe having a political agenda all of their own. So it's interesting to sort of think about who's there and who's not there. You've got this, like you were saying before, sometimes it's like, why can't you see the obvious here? Umbers have got wood, Manderleys have got shipwrights, work together, make boats, sorted. You know, you've got these natural resources. And it turns out that they, it seems like they've agreed to work together, but kind of, not happily. And I think that's the last we hear of that. What happens after that? Do they build this massive war fleet? This
is part of the Northern conspiracy that they have continued to build ships, unbeknownst to Roose and Ramsay.
Right.
That they are actually doing that,
working quite closely together.
I mean, if the Iron Islands can do it. If Euron can do it in the space of 3 episodes, no. They must be doing it because winter is coming. You need to keep people busy, and you also need to have other potential sources to escape if you need to.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing they are still building ships, because they can do it quite quietly at that side.
Yeah.
Nobody will. The only person who may know is Littlefinger, and it may be that Littlefinger will run into them, and they'll take care of him, or they'll take care of a Littlefinger contingent at that side. They can do. I think they could do it. They could be doing it quite quietly, for sure. The other thing that's big about this is Bran's vision/dream that seems to be triggered by Clay telling him about Stannis's letter about Jaime and Cersei and how they're very like the Targaryens, and it triggers a kind of a stumble from Bran, and then later we also have Hodor stuff in this chapter, but I've skipped on to Bran's dream because we've talked about it before, and I just wonder how significant is it for him to know that it's Jaime, and how now knowing what we know at the end of Dance to do with Bran, or the end of Feast even to do with Bran, how important is it that that's resolved it for Bran, that Jaime stuff? Is it going to come up again that the Golden Man is Jaime?
Well, from a reader's point of view, you want it to, don't you? You want there to be some resolution to that, because you've been led at this point to feel that there needs to be a justifiable redemption arc for Jaime. So if he was somehow forgiven, or there was a, you know, closure or some sort of resolution to that, to Bran and Jaime.
For Bran's I think that's way more important for Jaime's character than it is for Bran's character.
Yeah. For Bran's character, I don't think it's. I think that's one of those earthly human things that is of no consequence anymore. Open your eyes, fly or die. Leave that. It doesn't matter who this golden-haired man is. This is the things that happened to you before you became who you are now. And there's. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was a massive trigger, though, wasn't it? It was a huge.
But I've said it before. I think it serves a psychological purpose for. I know I've said this about a million times in our discussions. For him to abandon the ego, and once if he pursued Jaime's identity, he wouldn't become the seer that he becomes. And I think that's why it won't. The only thing I can think that it would serve is if it's the way for Bran to figure out how to see things but not let it affect him later on. Like not to recognize that Jaime pushed him, because he needs that detail in order to make X, Y, and Z decision, or in order to influence things in such a way, but not to do it in an emotional manner, to do it so that it's an avenue to finding out information, not to settle old scores, if you know what I mean.
I think it just becomes a different. He has to. It's like absolving the ego. You just leave that behind. That's the. I mean, there's another vision of Dream somewhere. I think either we've passed it in Game of Thrones or it's coming up, but where there's a winged wolf that's chained, and this is in one of Bran's dreams. And you could look at that as like, you know, the winged wolf is Bran and his path and his ancestry and his destiny, his abilities, etc. But he's chained, and maybe that's he has to break the chains of feeling that there needs to be some absolution or resolving of this thing with Jaime, or any other human beef he might have with somebody. It's just like, I know that, but that was. I mean, this is very amplified in the TV show, where in the last sort of couple of episodes, it's like, wow, Bran's just not Bran anymore. So he's now a different person.
This is my ultimate question. Will we have Bran POVs going into wins? Will there come a point where we won't be able to have a Bran POV?
I think that would have to be the case, because otherwise,
if he's all seeing,
it's like Wikipedia. You know, it's like Sorry.
No, sorry, I interrupted you.
I was just saying that you would have to move away from that for point of views, as much, because it would give us all the answers. It would give us all the answers, and we can't. You know, it would
make him boring.
Yeah.
I think the last chapter will be a Bran POV.
Iron Crown says maybe Bran's point of view ends right before he goes into the weirwood. Yeah, I think
it could be the last chapter of Winds. Even is the last chapter.
Yeah.
And also, Ian said another reason Catelyn should have stayed at Winterfell. Absolutely, Catelyn should have gone back to Winterfell long ago. She should have been back in Winterfell long ago. And probably Theon would not. Balon may have not attacked had Catelyn been there, potentially. I don't know. I thought that was a really interesting chapter. I think if anyone's interested in the Grand Northern Conspiracy, you can't ignore that chapter at all.
No.
But yeah, that's all I had for Bran 2. Did you have anything else?
There's a break in the middle. where he takes a trip to the Godswood and he sees Osha in the water.
Sorry, yeah.
And I just thought it was, again, quite poetic when she says the reason that she wanted to go for a swim is because she wanted to reach the bottom, because she couldn't find the bottom, it was too deep. Again, it's this feeling of like the underworld that we don't know, the depths, this is going to be something that will be apparent in Bran's story. This is the first time, maybe the only time, but Osha refers to Hodor as a giant, and we get this sense again. We get this poor backstory of Hodor being bullied, and he's such a gentle soul. He never fights back, even though he's got, he's got this enormous strength, and he could be, Bran thinks about, or Osha refers to, maybe he could have, maybe Hodor could have been a great knight as well. And I just thought that's such a shame that actually, yes, Bran and Hodor both were denied the potential opportunity of being, famous, renowned knights because of all of this.
There's also there's like that connection with Hodor, that potentially there's the giant references here. There's also a lot of people point to that idea Hodor could have been a knight as being a Duncan the Tall reference, that potentially he came from Duncan the Tall as well.
That's true.
So both of those, I think it's giant. I think he's more giant than.
So it's interesting that Osha keeps asking Bran about his wolf dreams, and he feels quite protective over it, as though it's this kind of like secret thing that only he is going through. So there's twice this happens in this chapter. He has two kind of dreams. One is more of a dream and one is more of a nightmare. So the dream is just very quickly, he dreams of the three-eyed raven pecking at his head. That's it. Then he wakes up. And then we get back to the Northern Lords again. But right at the very end of the chapter, we get Bran having this fly or die nightmare. And again, the imagery of him being blinded, like the raven, the crow is pecking his eyes out. And it's this feeling of, I think this parallels Arya's story later on in the House of Black and White, where she has to become blind before she sees the light, if you like, before the enlightenment is the suffering, which again, kind of, you could hark back to Dany's chapter with that, before she gets anywhere. Dany's just beginning now to start having a bit of a breakthrough after this horrific journey through the Red Waste. But again, it's all the characters are now starting to have really interesting journeys. And we're starting to see what, we've got to pay attention to what's happening in the background and think about whose point of view is this? Okay, it's a child, it's Bran, and this is what Bran thinks. And this is what Arya thinks. She's a child. So you've got to think about, are there other things, little small observations that they make that we could think, well, actually, what the hell is going on there? Like the beginning of some kind of big northern conspiracy. But yeah, the suffering and the blindness before enlightenment, I think it kind of, we see that in Bran and Arya and Jon to an extent, and Dany's chapters. Yeah,
and just on Osha as well, that she talks about, Bran says, freezing because she's naked, and she talks about how she was suckling icicles as a babe. Now we know coming into dance that the wildlings are kind of, they're already intermarrying among the north, and that it's likely that the wildlings are going to be the hardiest people, and a lot of them will survive, where a lot of the northerners may not, even though they're hardy as well. Like there's a lot of heirs have been lost, and a lot of people will be lost in the north by the time we get to Winds and Dream. If we have to Dream. Ian says, or Bran's POVs could be 5 pages. He comes out of the weirwood, describes what he eats and does in real life, and the moment he returns to the weirwood net, the chapter ends.
Yeah.
I love that 5 pages. That's very specific. I like that. But yeah, no, it's I just I think with him repressing so much of his own ego later, and Pisan says, Ian, that's the one way Bran could work it. Yeah, I think it's going to be definitely he'll have to rein in Bran. And I wonder, is that part of the problem now with people, with certain characters? I wonder, is that part of what's holding him up? Obviously, he's this very dense network of characters and plot, but also, how do you go forward with somebody like Bran? How do you go forward with someone like Jon?
I don't think we've ever, apart from people dying, I don't think we've ever had a point of view where we've had a point of view and then suddenly we don't anymore from that character for whatever reason.
No.
So it would be quite interesting if we get this.
I'm still not sure we're going to get Jon.
Yeah, that would be another. Yeah,
because I don't see. I'm not sure how we could. No, we haven't. We haven't, because anybody who gives a prologue dies.
Yeah.
So, or an epilogue. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, will we get Bran or Jon again? You know, there's potential. Like it's another problem with Arya. How far can you go with Arya now that she's a faceless man? Because she's got skills and knowledge that, you know, that protect. It's just one of those things. And Sonny says, unless Jon comes back as someone different. Well, we know we're not getting any different POVs, so
yeah. So we may not really hear from Jon again, apart from just maybe through Sam.
Yeah.
If Sam goes, yeah.
So before we go, Claire, you were telling me about the bookshop in the US.
Oh yeah, I heard on, I think it was Grey Area I was listening to earlier today, that there, and again, I don't know how much of this is true, but the winds of, there's a bookshop in the US and it's a bookstore chain which has been established for, you know, since the 20s, so it's a well-established book chain. And they put out their list of reads, you know, recommended reads for 2018. And they put on their list Winds of Winter, and they had a date of the 6th of September as a release date. So, you know, that could have been a clerical error, admin error. It could just be that this was a date that was given a long time ago, maybe, and it's not reflecting how things are now. But I mean, for us, that would be perfect. Well, first of all, it's 3 days after my birthday. So that would be fantastic.
He knew.
It would mean that I've got plenty of time to read Winds of Winter and be a book fan way before the finale of the TV show, which would work out perfectly. Yeah, and also it would mean that we'd have time for our reread and we'd be able to get through our schedule. Yeah.
Because I think the way I worked it out before, I think we said we'd be finished by August.
Lisa's here. Hi, Lisa. House polished.
Hi, Lisa.
House polished forever.
Oh my God, we both did that at the same time. Oh my God. Everyone says we could get sporadic descriptive chapters like Feast, e.g. Bran the Broken Boy, Jon the Resurrected Man. Yeah, and some of the released chapters from Winds definitely suggest that might be a pattern he'll go with.
And for Arya as well, like Mercy.
Yep. And Elaine and all that kind of thing. We still haven't gotten Germ's 2017 year-end update for Winds. And Pisan says, I really don't think we're getting TWOW before the show finishes. I think that's true too, because there's definitely a July 2019 date. Didn't we talk about that before, Claire, on the weekly page?
We've heard. Yeah, that's been talked about before. Yeah.
And I know everybody got excited because Gurm's been with his publishers this year, but I know he releases a lot of stuff. I mean, he releases so many anthologies and things like that. And Sunny thinks that the chapters will be different in Winds as well. And we're getting Gurm's Night Flyers TV show before Game of Thrones season 8 or Winds. Yep, and also there's every chance we'll get a prequel to Game of Thrones before we get this book. So they're in talks. He's I don't know. I think we'll just have to see. I'd love it if it was September. It'd be brilliant.
It would be perfect. It would really fit into our schedules, and
just for us.
It'd be nice not to interfere with the TV show. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know how that would impact on my experience of being a show watcher.
It's going
We
could do maybe even between this, between Clash and Storm, we could do just a quick discussion on just wins and our expectations of. I'm very worried about wins because I'm going to have to go completely offline while I'm reading it, because
me too.
people are going to devour that book, and I have already had to mute a lot of people on my YouTube channel because in my subscriptions, because they're putting up spoilers for the show already, and it's just like people just don't, in their thumbnails, in their titles. It's like, come on, like it's going to be 100 million times worse for wins. It'll be so bad.
Yeah. There'll be massive spoilers all over the place.
Like even when any of the chapters have come out in the last couple of years, before I even know the chapter's bloody out, the spoilers are up.
Yeah. It'd be the same, just like radio silence for like a week, 2 weeks, till I can just devour it myself.
Yeah.
And then we'll have to have like some kind of like agreed date where we can begin to talk about it. Win sabbatical, definitely.
Totally. I think I'm definitely going to be offline. So I'm just gonna, whenever I find out the publication date is, I'm gonna like have all my videos ready to just be. They're all gonna be scheduled. I'll just put a note in my description box. I won't be commenting on any male video. Prefer somebody polished video and puts in a win spoiler. We'll leave it with P. Sand, who said TOI could spoil season 8, even if it's just readers speculating on what happens. So HBO might not want the book out, and Gurm may be okay with that. I think that's true. I would think Gurm just wants to get the show out of the way and then release. Yeah. By the way, I had this tour guide in Malta who swore that all of the books were finished, and that it was all, or was it Malta or Northern Ireland? Anyway, one of the tours that we did, one of the Game of Thrones tours, swore that the books were finished and that it was in Gurm's contract with HBO that he wasn't allowed to release the books before the show ended. I was like, this is just crazy. Did they not look at the history of the release of these books? It just takes ages to finish them.
No, that's so much ridiculous speculation.
Gurm is okay with it because he's nowhere finishing wins, Ion says. I think that's more likely to be the truth. Although I do want it to come out for your birthday as well, Claire.
I mean, personally, I go as I always have with, I don't care how long it takes him to write it, as long as he's happy with it, with putting it out.
As soon as that's with a publisher, you're going to have every hacker in the world attacking that publisher. So there is absolutely no way. They might not give any time to dropping that book. They might just drop that book because the danger of them being hacked is going to be huge.
That would be the best thing for them to do.
I think so. So if it is right, and I said it to you later on, why wouldn't they just announce it? But it just occurred to me that if it's going to come out at all, because look at the show.
It's just going to be
the show. How many times is the show hacked this year? So
no, they would. That would be the worst thing ever. I think it's going to be like a drive-by release. That's it.
I'd say it'll be whoever needs to know. They may not even tell the people that are printing the damn book what they're printing until it's just, they probably go to China or something and have them all printed, and like, so that nobody in the factory speaks the language of the book. Like there'll be some mad, like there'll be a lot of, this is going to be like, if it comes out before the show at all, there there won't be anything. But anyway, they can put a print-on-demand machines in bookstores. Yeah, I've heard them. They did that with something, didn't they? Yeah, I've heard that that's being talked about with the Winds print-on-demand. That's possible. That would be, yeah. It's going to be the most sought after book in history. So it's exciting. And nerve-wracking for him, I'm sure.
So who have we got next week? Let's see the chapters we've got next week. I don't know. Are people reading along with us, or are they just listening to our ramblings every week? I don't know. Yes, we've got Tyrion we've got a Sansa chapter, Arya chapter. We've actually got 2 Tyrion chapters.
Yeah.
And another Bran chapter and Cat again. Lovely. We finished with a Cat chapter.
You love Cat.
That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 chapters.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to seeing Sansa again. That's good. All right. Thank you so much, folks, for joining us in the chat. And thank you, Claire, for being your oracle.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much to everybody and for your input. It was brilliant. And we'll see you next week for the rest of we're getting into starting to get into the second quarter of our book. So thanks so much, everybody. Have a brilliant week, and we'll talk to you next Sunday. Same.
Bye.
Bye.